Portra 3 accommodates material sizes of up to 8.5 to 9 inches in width. The material length will depend on whether you are using a cutting mat. When using a cutting mat, the maximum length is 12 inches. When using rolled materials that bypass a cutting mat, such as vinyl or heat transfer material, you can use materials of up to 60 feet in length. There are several guide marks on the front of the machine. The first mark is the cutting mat loading guide mark. You will always align the left edge of your cutting mat with this mark. The next mark is the loading guide mark for the standard letter size or 8.5 by 11 inch materials when you're not using a cutting mat. The third mark is the loading guide mark for A4 size materials when you're not using a cutting mat. Proper alignment will ensure that both of the pinch rollers are gripping your mat or material. The rest of the raised lines along the front of the machine are present to help reduce friction for your mat or material as it is moving in and out of the machine during operation. They are not guide marks and can be ignored. Please note that the Portra 3 pinch rollers cannot be moved or adjusted. When using a cutting mat, make sure that you have defined your cutting mat size and material size in the software. The software will then show you on screen where your material should be placed onto the cutting mat. Make sure to always match your actual setup with your on-screen setup. Once your material is on your cutting mat, align the left-hand side of the mat with the leftmost guide mark. Both rollers should be gripping the sides of the mat evenly. With the cutting mat aligned properly, press the leading top edge of the mat up against the pinch rollers and press the load button or up arrow on the machine. The mat should be pulled into the machine and be ready to receive your job. When cutting materials that are fed directly into the cutting machine, make sure that you have defined your cutting mat setting as none and the correct material size in the software. The leading edge of the material should be straight across and not cut at an angle. Align the left-hand side of the material with the proper guide mark. Both rollers should be gripping the sides of the material evenly. If the size of the material is smaller and not able to be gripped by both pinch rollers, you will need to use the cutting mat. Be careful not to shift the left side of your material beyond the loading mark guideline. Otherwise, it can obstruct the auto blade's ability to set itself. With the material aligned properly, press the leading top edge of the material up against the pinch rollers and press the load button or up arrow on the machine. The material should be pulled into the machine and be ready to receive your job. Aside from setting up your mat or material, you'll also need to load your blade or other tool into the machine. When using the auto blade, you do not have to manually set the blade level. This will be done by the machine based on the blade setting selected in the software. If using another manual type blade, you will need to first adjust the blade setting prior to loading it in the machine. Once your blade is ready, load it by dropping it into the blade holder in the machine with the blade pointing down and the flat edge of the blade facing toward the back of the machine. Make sure to push the blade all the way down before locking it into place. Once seated in the machine, lock the blade by pressing the lock lever inward. Once you have your mat or material and your blade loaded, before sending your job from the software, always make sure you have enough clearance in front of and behind your machine. We hope this information helps you to make sure your machine is properly loaded and ready to send your job.